I hit the road as soon as the sun illuminates the valley. I wanted to make sure I got as far past West Virginia by the time the sun goes down tonight, having learned my lesson about the sun and valleys just a couple days ago. I travel through areas deep in coal country with these massive coal mining facilities that just sort of spring out of nowhere in the valley as I'm driving. They look like a monolith to an older time. The factories are massive and empty appearing, and really they wouldn't have any signs of activity except for the clusters of parked vehicles that are in the parking lot next to the facility, indicating that somewhere inside those gigantic steel behemoths, there's actually living people somewhere in there. As I was traveling through the mountains, I ran into a motorcycle club on an observation pull-off by the name of Brotherhood of the Wheel from Boone County, West Virginia. As soon as I got off my bike, they came up and approached me. I was a little nervous at first, but we ended up just shooting the breeze, and the club sort of looked at my bike and were asking me questions about my trip and what I was doing. I was kind of explaining I was taking this really long trip on this bike, and they were kind of wondering how I managed to get that Navi so deep up into the mountains. Had a beer, had a smoke, talked about the road ahead. They gave me a little bit of information about just driving in general in this area. And after some brief conversation, I had to hit my way back down on the road. So my experience with those guys were like 10 out of 10. I think patches sometimes get a bad reputation because it's just assumed that they're going to be difficult. But I think just generally, if you kind of respect them, a lot of those guys are just older. And, sometimes you just got to sort of walk away from any disagreement, but there was nothing with these guys. I got a little bit nervous, but they were super cool, super inquisitive, and just made me feel very comfortable. Brotherhood of the Wheel out of West Virginia, you guys are awesome. By 5:15, I'm passing back through Hamlin, and by 8 o'clock, I'm crossing into Ohio on my way out of West Virginia. I cruise my way back along the Ohio River Scenic Highway until I come back to that Shawnee camping grounds that I stayed at before. I set up camp and passed out there again. Day 8 wrap up. I traveled a total of 286 miles, spent $23.13 on gas, $11.07 on food, and $65 on camping for a total of $99.20. So day 9, I wake up and I am ready to go home and see my family. This is the longest I've actually been away from my wife and my son, and as my travels bring me back home, my thoughts are filled with them. Sure, I talk to them on the phone every night, but it's really not the same as seeing them. I really miss my family. So not even 2 hours into my journey, I ran into an issue. I basically miscalculated how far it would take me to get gas at the nearest gas station, and I was almost to Manchester, Ohio, and my bike ran out of gas 13 miles before I got there. I sat there for about 20 minutes, and luckily a gentleman was nice enough to take my tank to the town, fill it up, and bring it back. Although he said it wasn't a problem, I clearly wasn't going to let that slide, and I maybe Google stalked him and sent him a thank you card with some money inside. Thank you again, fellow teacher, for your good deed. I appreciate it. Thank you. I zigzag through a very misty and periodically raining Ohio, Kentucky, and then make my way to Indiana. At several points, I am just simply in my rain suit, soaked but not too deeply, and just driving through the Midwest, making time, and, thinking about my family on my way home. Even the trees surrounding the road end up turning against me because even when it stops raining, there's still rain on the trees, and then those end up dropping on me, and I'm getting rained on again as I'm going through Indiana. Eventually, towards the end of the afternoon, I make my way past Terre Haute and into the flat, familiar fields of southeastern Illinois, and finally, the rain lets up. I spend the last few hours of the day cruising through southern Illinois. At a Casey's in Lovington, Illinois, I ran into some guy named Rambo. He was a local guy who thought that my story of traveling on this bike was really interesting. Shout out to you, Rambo. I know he liked my video, or talked about liking my video, so here's the video for it. Shout out to you, sir. For a minute as I'm driving, the sun's starting to set, and I imagine that I might be able to just drive quick 6 more hours and get home by 5 a.m., right? The old I'm gonna stay up all night and drive through the night. Any hope of that is quickly squashed when lightning again begins to flash across the sky, and the headlight on the Navi is just ill equipped to handle the moonless darkness of a nighttime thunderstorm. So that was probably the only real area of opportunity I could find on the Navi thus far. The headlight, which is definitely adequate on a moon filled night with city ambient light, really does struggle to light the way in some of the more rural areas of the Midwest. I can see maybe 20, 30 feet ahead of me, and I'm getting good light with maybe another 50 feet out. It's very dim. Decided I'm a bit fatigued from the long drive at this point to fight a long drive in the rain again, so I pull off to the side, find a campsite, and zoom in. Just a few miles away, I find the Friends Creek campground, slip in like a thief in the night, and crash out right after I get the tent set up. Day 9 wrap up. I traveled a total of 372 miles, $26.61 on gas, $13.21 on food, and $45 on camping, for a total of $84.82. Day 10, I wake up in the early morning, hit the shower, and begin to pack up. I'm going to make it home today. My mind and my body are finally starting to feel it, and more than ever, I am just rushing home to see my family. The rain has given me a pardon for today, and clear, warm skies await as I cruise through the back roads of central Illinois, enjoying the familiar scenery and enjoying not getting rained on. My legs and back are pretty sunburnt, and my posterior is officially numb of all feeling. The city of Peoria is a pretty familiar marker to me. In my younger days, I did some stand-up comedy, and I actually did a couple of private shows out there. Peoria has a really strong semblance to my hometown as well. The old River City architecture clashes really strongly with the patchwork of modern architecture that's along the river. I leave Peoria in my wake and just push onward. Once again, I find myself out in the familiar flat land of central Illinois, eastern Iowa, right? Corn and soybean fields, the sky stretching on for miles. I cross the river into Burlington, gas up, and the home stretch awaits. As I'm heading up the road I took down to get to Burlington, I get a surprise. The main road has actually undergone major construction within just a few days since I was last out here. The main road is blocked and out, and there's an alternate route that takes you through the gravel and dirt roads that are along the actual Mississippi River itself. And it's the only route that doesn't involve backtracking 20 to 30 miles back into Burlington. As I'm driving on these roads, I notice immediately that I am in some pretty rough terrain for this bike. You see, in the world of non-paved roads in Iowa, there are 5 distinct levels of road. There's big gravel, regular gravel, small gravel, dirt roads, and then level B roads. Each one has its own hazards, but preferably medium to small gravel roads are the best for travel in general. So this road actually starts off with big gravel. This makes for a very uneven surface for the bike to handle. I have to drive for a while very slowly, sliding back and forth along the road as I'm riding. Eventually, the road changes to medium to small gravel and then a patch of slightly muddy dirt. I almost wipe out driving through the patch of muddy dirt, but I regain my composure on the gravel road again and just plug along. Looking at Google, it suggested a much faster route for me, and here is that route. As you can see, some other folks must have taken Google's suggestion. This is what we would call a level B road, which in Iowa is basically means it's a road that is barely a road if the weather is right. Level B roads are in no way maintained by the state, county, or city, and are basically at your own peril style roads. This would have been a death sentence for my bike if I tried to make it all the way through this. So just a reminder, make sure when you're traveling, don't just rely on your phone or an app. always keep your eyes peeled for stuff that just doesn't look right. I know this happened to me in West Virginia when I was driving through mud. Make sure to use your instincts and you will be okay, but just make sure to keep your eyes peeled. Eventually, I make it back onto the road that I was supposed to be on and continue the cruise through eastern Iowa. One last slide through a few familiar towns, and I am finally home. Day 10, I traveled a total of 330 miles, used $22.69 in gas, $11.45 in food, for a total of $34.14. Obviously, I didn't do any camping as I was finally home. In summary, what an adventure. I honestly was not sure if the bike was going to be able to handle that level of abuse, and it passed with flying colors. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to handle that level of abuse myself, and I passed. Looking at some of the basics for the trip, here's some of the results. So I've gone a total of 7 different states thus far on this trip. I absolutely loved Jamestown, but the weather really stopped me from being able to see the largest part of the museum or the other part of the museum down the road. With so many museums in that area, I wouldn't mind going back and just doing a massive museum hop. I also didn't get to see the ocean despite being only 60 miles away from it. I've never seen the Atlantic, so I'm definitely going to have to come back east anyway and see the ocean. Looking at my expenses, I stayed relatively true to the mission, only overspending due to a few emergency expenditures combined with the allure of Captain George's seafood extravaganza. Ideally, I would have spent more time doing cost analysis on camping to find the perfect spots, but some days my finding a place at the last moment would run 60 to 70% of my daily budget. That being said, I can see how stealth camping again is becoming bigger in many areas. Looking at the entirety of the trip, it looks like I did a total of 2,840 and a half miles. Now that's the full trip back and forth, plus roughly 84 miles of wrong turns, back roads, and detours. Total gas was $194.04. Total food was $222.83. Camping was $327. And then other costs, such as museum pass and phone charger, $54.51 for a total of $808.35, bringing me well below the $1,000 goal for this trip. Yay! When I was a kid and real young, my dad used to work in other states and we would take our RV, Texas, Indiana, Illinois. Camping used to be an adequate way of simply living a little rough to avoid spending hotel prices, but in some places it's $60+ just a camp. I think the cheapest place I stayed was $20. It was completely primitive, and it didn't really have any utilities to offer. Especially riding my little bike and having such a small tent, I saw 1,000 places where I could have just very easily tucked away in a 5x5 space, draped a cut-up ghillie suit over the top of it, and caught some Z's on the low. And I know homeless laws are all that prevent such things from occurring, but the more I see prices just staying somewhere, going up to camp, I could easily see people utilizing stealth camping as a much more affordable option. Police be damned. The 2022 Navi held together like an absolute champ. This bike, completely stock, survived mountain climbs, treacherous storm and wind conditions, including that infamous ride down the Blue Ridge Mountains in the middle of the night. With 2,000 and some change miles over 10 days, the bike also endured some of the serious near-capacity weight limits over hundreds and hundreds of miles. The frame is still solid. Everything works on subsequent runs. There are no issues at all. Nothing looks burnt up and not working. So when I did an oil change, I didn't see any metal shavings inside the catch or anything, indicating that there's no problems with the inner components of the engine. I have, and definitely would again, trust my health and well-being to this bike. This bike is 10 out of 10. Any shortcomings from the bike would only be from the variation of its designed use, right? While I did take the bike halfway across the US and back, its primary function is just scooting around urban areas, not going on multi-state drives over mountains. And now let's get to the numbers. Here are my first official submissions into the Lomad official, unofficial Honda Navi records. The first category I'd like to inaugurate into the channel is the longest single distance trip on a Navi. Looking at the longest single trip distance, from the time I left to the time I returned home, I traveled 2,840 miles over 10 days. The next category I'd like to inaugurate is the longest distance in a 24-hour period on a Navi. On July 21st, the first day, I traveled 385 miles, my personal best and my official entry into the longest single day distance on a Navi. Obviously, the Navi rider community is going to decide if any of this is legitimate, but when I called Honda and asked them about records, they just talked to me like I was an insane person. Feel free to come to the Discord that's going to be listed down in the comments and help us contribute to the records, discuss future trips, or even setting up the possibility of a Navi Fest, right? Some sort of mass gathering of Navi riders on a massive trip, like a swarm of bees. As always, if you liked this content and the time and effort I put into this video, please make sure to like and comment and subscribe. It's the only way YouTube knows the content I'm making is worthy of popping up on other people's recommended. And the more subscribers I get, the more you can brag that you're an OG subscriber. You were one of the first. I'm currently pushing for 5,000 subscribers. If you see this content and know somebody who owns or drives a Navi, is interested in low budget travel, or just needs some time to kill watching cool videos, please point them my way. Thank you and have a great day.